Okay, so in this tutorial now, I'm going to be showing you how to get the projectile from your ship over here, your bullet firing in various directions, based on the way that you're facing. So if I go into my spaceship, the first thing that I'm going to want to do is create the actual bullet at the center of the spaceship, which rather than using a down pushed event, such as when right is held down or left is held down, if I used that, what would happen is you would end up with a ridiculous stream of bullets, which would probably cause your game to crash, because it would be creating one of those bullets every like 0.0001 seconds. So by using pressed, it'll only do it every time we push a key, which is usually what most games feature. As you can see, I've copied and pasted that section of code using Alt, click and drag. And I'm just going to get rid of this chunk of code in here, because otherwise it'll just make him spin a bit faster. The place that you can find where to create objects from is under scene, and that's because you're creating the objects in the scene. And with this, you have two options here. So the first option is just to choose kind of like a general idea of which layer you want it to be on. We talked about layers in a previous tutorial, so whether that's front, middle, or back, or you can get kind of really nitpicky if you've got like a ridiculous number of layers. You can choose to be more specific by choosing a specific layer or ID name. But for now, I'm just going to stick with this basic one. So now I just need to specify the actor type. Now this is something that quite a few people get caught up on, and it's quite frustrating, is when they choose to open actor type, they'll click on it and they'll see that this is already ticked, and a lot of people kind of choose the attribute option rather than the actor type option, and then they get stuck on it for a little bit of time. So just choose the one that's already ticked. So I'm going to want my bullet to be spawned at the corner of, at the center of the spaceship. And the way that I'm going to find out where that is I want to I could either just type in a number. So let's say let's make it spawn at 20 and 20. Let me give us a quick test. But what this will do is it'll create that at the coordinates of 20 and 20 on the screen. And even if your ship was at that location, as you move around the level, it won't update that position unless you give it the specific coordinates of the player. Thankfully, there's an easy way to do that. In a similar way to you have the direction of self code, you can find out the X and Y position of your character. So I think, oops. So the key I actually got for shooting is up at the moment, but you can see that there's this pink bar in the corner forming. That is, where the bullet's being spawned. So there's a couple of things I want to do. The first one is I'm going to go into my controls, and I'm going to add myself a new control. So the way you do that is you click on settings, you click on controls, click to add a new control, and you specify the name of it here. I'm going to call it space. You could call it shoot, or but keeping it to the actual name of the key makes it easier. And then in this bottom one, you just specify what key you want it to be. So you could click on any key on the keyboard and it'd change it based on what you pushed. I'm going to do space. What I'm also going to do whilst I'm here is I am going to add extra inputs to each of these. So up, down, left and right. So for people who might want to use WASD, I'm going to add that functionality in there. So literally just pressing the little plus key will allow you to add an extra control method, which is pretty useful. So now, if I go to up, space should be listed. So now it'll create, when I hammer the space bar, it'll create a bullet rather than when I push up. But just before we click play to see what that looks like, we're gonna make sure it creates this stuff at the position of the character. So I'm gonna for X and for Y, I'm gonna show you two different ways of accessing this number. So the first one is to go to Actor, and literally, if you've got it set by default on position, out of all these categories here, X of Actor should be the one you're looking for. Now it will say Actor when you're clicking dragging it out, but it should be set to Self rather than anything else. I mean, there'll probably maybe situations where you want it to be something different, but for now this is what you want it to be. And you want to specify X center rather than X, which would be the top left-hand corner of your actor. Now for this one I'm just going to show you another method of retrieving that kind of number. If you click on the little arrow here, you can scroll down, find the category of actor, and click on this here. Now it's going to say X of actor, and I know that'll probably, you'll be like, I don't want to input, X into the Y category. If you just click on it, you can always change that number and change what it's specified to, in the little drop downs. So now, and also what I'd like to do is I'd like to make it spawn the bullet behind our spaceship, because then it won't appear above it when it's being shot. It'll kind of almost appear to fire underneath the fuselage. Now this is good, but the main thing that you'll see in a second that is missing is that there's no direction. The projectile is just going to remain static when we fire it, so it's almost like just kind of jettisoning, trash into space. So there you go, and if I spam it, and I can kind of fly into them like space debris. Cool. And what you'll also notice is that I can actually bump into these, and that's, you'd think that'll be all right, but we might end up with a situation where you actually, once we add velocity to this, it might end up with our ship getting pushed by the projectiles. So one way to stop that from happening would be to go to collision of our projectile, which we're going to go into now, our bullet, and we're going to change it from solid collision to that of a sensor. So if I've now done that, I shouldn't be able to collide with the bullets that I'm firing. So if we go to events now, we're going to create ourselves a new event, and that's going to be a created event, which will, I'm trying to think of a way to explain it. So when you're dealing with projectile directions, if you were wanting your, I'll tell you what I'll do is I'll do the code for when created, and then once I've finished with that, I'll show you what happens if you then copy that code into when updated, and you should kind of see a difference to how the projectiles move. So going back to our spaceship, what we need to find out is what direction the spaceship is facing. The problem is that we can't send that information. Like, these are two separate objects, so we need a way to send this information between the two. And for that, we're going to have to create something called an attribute. There are two types of attribute. You have, a regular attribute, and then you have a game attribute. Another phrase for this would be a public and private variable. In that a regular game attribute just exists within the character itself and will only affect what's happening within the character. But a game attribute is something that can be accessed by anything within the actual game itself. So for example, if we recorded the direction in the spaceship, we could save that across. That piece of information could be kind of transferred across to the bullet and retrieved. So I'm going to create a new game attribute, So I'm going to call this ship direction. I'm going to set that to an initial value of 0. I'm not going to set a specific one for now because I'm going to automatically tell it to set the ship direction to, I'm going to automatically set the ship direction to whatever the player's direction is.